Is this thing on? Testing, testing, testing. Oh, hey, before we jump into this episode, I want to tell you guys how excited I am, number one, to have you, but also to have brand new special guests featuring incredible insights and stories of resilience. Also, do not miss our special Micro Matters episodes. These are short, impactful moments of encouragement designed to support you in your journey of healing from emotional, narcissistic, and spiritual abuse. Whether it's a powerful interview or a quick dose of hope, we're here to remind you your story matters. Thanks again for downloading this episode, and now hope you enjoy today's special broadcast. Hey friends, survivors of abuse, thanks so much again for downloading and subscribing to the Your Story Matters podcast. I'm your host, Branon Dempsey, and we are continuing the series with another episode of Micro Matters. Here today, I'm going to talk a little bit more of the aftermath from my tragic accident, which seems almost comical, which I'll explain in a little bit. If you hadn't heard the last episode, I encourage you to scroll back through iTunes, Spotify, wherever that you're finding this podcast, and take a listen to this enormous yet bizarre accident that had occurred. Today, I'm going to talk about healing from trauma, how it really is a daily choice. Trauma changes us. Sometimes it's physical, other times it's emotional. And this all goes back to the day that I collided with a deer. Yes, a deer. Not by a car, but unconventionally with a bicycle. You've heard me right. As I explained in the last episode, which I give more detail, I've done a lot of downhill cycling and downhill racing as we live here in Austin, Texas. And to my surprise, one day, as I was going home, there was a flock of deer at the bottom of the hill. And one of the deer tried to take a pot shot at me, thinking that she could outrace me. And within a flash of a moment, she thought she won the race and decided to barrel to my left, pushing me and my bike over and send me tumbling down the hill. Well, I will say that I'm glad it's over. And I'm also not glad that deer live in our territory, but there's nothing that I can do about it. And I do love animals and they're sweet. But let me tell you, deer are not the smartest. So I'm going to tell you some of the things that I've learned since the accident. My recovery took an amazing toll on me, more than what I had bargained for. Had I had a conversation with the deer ahead of time, I would have negotiated a lot more conservatively of what the outcome would be. So the surgery went well, and I think I'm speaking to you now since that day. So I can move my arm again, but it's still a slow recovery. I'll be entering what's called physical therapy pretty soon. But I've had a lot of complications along the way, as many of you have, I'm sure, experienced when you're in any kind of recovery and you're on medication. You have to deal with all the side reactions. So that was me. I found myself back in the ER 2 more times, dealing with the same thing of the side reactions. And finally, everything cleared up. I owe it all to my sweet family, my supportive wife, who's been by my side every single moment. It brings tears to my eyes to consider all that she's gone through to not only help me, but to be there for our boys, and not to be the strong one, but just to be the real one. And I appreciate and love her so much for that. And also our boys that are always with me, and all they ever know is joy. The great thing about this experience is that they only saw me in the minimal parts of my pain. And even if they saw me in the depths of my pain, which I think they did, that's okay too, because I know this story belongs to them as well. So, as I proceed, the crash wasn't just with the deer. It was with fear, pain, and a sense of loss. On that day, I broke my arm, but I also shattered a little bit of my confidence, the very little that I thought I had. So recovery was slow, there's no doubt. Some days were harder than others. Pain reminded me of the accident. The scar told the story over and over again. Well, let's say in my case, not just the scar, but everything else. Now, I will gladly say that only my arm was broken in this process. Not anything else in my body. Sure, I got banged up and bruised and scraped, but the good thing is that I was wearing protective gear, and thank God he had his hand on me. But healing took work. It wasn't easy. And I know coming up ahead, physical therapy is going to stretch me more than just my muscles. It's going to stretch my patience, and I know I'm going to have to trust that process all over again. But what I kept reminding myself and continue to remind myself daily is just about small steps forward. And some steps you have to take back. And it's okay to do that. I think we become so intrinsic into a world that they keep wanting us to run forward. And I think we forget about the journey along the way, that it does involve walking. It also involves sitting and taking a break. It also involves maybe taking a step back to get a bigger picture of what you may encounter in your journey and how to recollect, how to recalibrate, how to do things over from a different perspective, because it only makes you stronger. So recovery from emotional trauma feels the same. It's messy. It's frustrating. Fear creeps in. It tries to control your thoughts. It tells you something that you're not. But healing is a choice. It's choosing not to let the accident or your trauma define you. It's waking up saying, I may hurt today, but I want to make one more choice, and I'm going to take one more step. So in the days that followed, I realized something profound. Here it is. Recovering from trauma, whether physical or emotional, it is a slow but deliberate process, because it requires courage, patience, and the willingness to face what hurts instead of running from it. And I think that's been the hardest part of my recovery, and the hardest part of me recovering from my own trauma since the age of 6, is that, I ran from my pain. I tried to bury it. I tried to act like it was just a deer, like it would just run away and be gone. But that's not what happens. Trauma sticks with us for life. And the reality is, do we choose to run away too? Or do we choose to fight? Or do we choose to learn from it, heal from it, and walk through it? And let me tell you, that is the hardest part. The accident was definitely unexpected, as much trauma often is. I would say all trauma is, right? One moment, everything seems fine. And then the next, you're in pain, shaken, unsure what to do next. And trauma doesn't ask for permission to enter our lives. It's like that deer. It's unpredictable. It just skips out in front of you and then leaving you to deal with all the aftermath. So the physical injury was obvious. My broken arm needed immediate care. But beneath the surface, a different kind of wound had formed. I was afraid to get back in the car when I had to go to all of my appointments at the doctor's, even though my accident was on a bike. But I was afraid of what might happen the next time. Recovering from a broken arm taught me much about the nature of healing. At first, I could do very little. I could only move my arm in so many increments, barely at all. And the crazy thing is that I even just went ahead and just worked, because why not? My right arm was fine, but my left arm, I couldn't move as much. So there's no doubt, pain limited my movements, and I had to rely on my family. The smallest task felt overwhelming. I remember even just walking through the house, just breathing heavily. Dad, are you okay? And I just kind of chuckled to myself. Yeah, but I'm trying to make this journey just from room to room. So healing began with small but intentional steps. Emotional healing works the same way. After trauma, even small things like getting out of bed or facing a fear, it can feel impossible. But just as a broken bone doesn't heal overnight, neither does the heart or the mind. It takes a lifetime. Healing is a process, you see, and that requires showing up each day, even when it's hard and even when you don't want to. Setbacks? Well, healing isn't linear. Some days I felt strong and capable, and other days the pain was so sharp and my memory of the accident haunted me. Even at night, I had trouble sleeping. Even at night, I felt like I was out of control just sliding down that hill, and I had to remind myself that I can't give up and that it's okay even that I do fear. It's okay that I still have these flashbacks and the moments of trauma that still replay in my mind. It's all a progression, even though when it feels slow. The emotional recovery that we experience from trauma is no different. Flashbacks, anxiety, self-doubt creeps in, makes you question whether if you're really getting better or not. But setbacks, did you know that they're also part of the process? That's right. It doesn't mean that you failed. It just means you're human. So what about facing fear? One of the hardest parts of my recovery was getting back behind my desk, trying to assume some sort of reality again. I know another bridge is coming where my doctor is going to clear me to drive, which hopefully may happen next week. And do I have a fear of another accident that could occur? Well, sure. But am I going to keep it? Am I going to keep myself from living? No. Facing fear doesn't mean it disappears. It just means that you choose not to let it control you. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned out of this whole experience. Because see, in the same way, emotional trauma requires us to confront what scares us. And it's hard. I know, because I've dealt with this pain. I've only been talking about it for maybe 6-7 years now, out of all the 45 years that I've lived. And whether it's trusting others again, sharing your story, or simply believing that healing is possible, the only way out is through. So what are my steps forward? What steps do we take together? Well, healing happens in the smallest moments. Each time I showed up to get up every day, I built strength. It's not just my arm, but it's in my resilience. And every time I push past my fear to take another step, I reclaim a piece of that confidence. I also reclaim a piece of my childhood. In emotional healing, small victories matter too. They matter. Reaching out for help, journaling your feelings, calling a friend, or simply even practicing breathing through a moment of panic are all steps towards wholeness. So, what's our daily choice? Trauma truly does change us. And that's something that we can always count on. Where I don't believe that, again, it's about running from our fear. But as said before, it's learning how to work through it. And I think the hardest part that I had to get over to realize is that I knew I really could do it. But it's just that fear again of, man, am I going to get through it? And you know what? You wouldn't be human if you didn't ask those questions, or if you didn't feel it, or if you even spoken it out loud. Try doing that. Why not just say to somebody, you know what? This scares me. You know what? I don't like this. You know what? In fact, I hate it. In fact, it just sucks, downright to the core. But what I've learned is that once you get it out and you begin to put a label on your feelings, you voice it, if you scream it, if you cry it out, the fact is you're getting it out. And it has, just like a wound, it has to get ugly before it gets better. So today, my arm is healing. And I'm going to be going to the doctor pretty soon for them to remove the staples. Sorry if that makes some of you squeamish, but I'm going to have a scar after this. But that scar, it may be a reminder of the accident, but that scar is a reminder of the strength that it took to recover. It's a reminder of my journey through my healing of my trauma. See, because scars, both physical and emotional, they tell a story. They don't define us, but they remind us of what we've overcome. So choose healing. If you're recovering from trauma, know this: healing isn't something that happens to you. It's something you choose day after day. Some days, that choice feels easy. Other days, it feels impossible. But every step you take, no matter how small, even if you have to take a step back to take another step forward, that's progress. Trauma may change you, but it doesn't ever, ever have to stop you. Healing is a journey, and each step forward is a testament to your courage. So let's do this together. Keep going, because you're stronger than you know. Thanks again for joining me here on another episode of Micro Matters. I'll be coming back to you again pretty soon with another update, more stories, and to help encourage each other as together we heal from our trauma, because your story matters. Guys, be sure to subscribe to this podcast, and it really would mean the world to me if you can share this with a friend and you take these steps in your own life to begin that repair and that recovery. So, see you next time soon. Remember, your story matters.